Welcome to In the Light. I am Anna Isabel. I am an astrologer as well as an analytical hypnotherapist. It is with tremendous pleasure that I have Allan Hunter with me today, who is a professor of literature and who is also a counselor and the author of two books, which I love. The first being The Path of the Path to Synchronicity or of Synchronicity. Help me out here, Allan.
Path of Synchronicity.
Path of Synchronicity. But the other one, which is the one that we're going to focus on today, is called Gratitude and Beyond: 5 Insights for a Fulfilled Life. And I couldn't think of a better subject for this podcast. Allan, welcome to In the Light.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so delighted to be here, and I so admire what you do.
Well, thank you. Now, that's lots of thank yous there. And so this brings us to gratitude. The reason why I wanted to talk about this with you is because the word gratitude is being used a lot. It's one of the current buzzwords. But for me, when people are talking about it, they say, I should be grateful for, or I should realize that I'm lucky. And it's almost as though they feel guilty. And that's not what you're understanding by gratitude. And it's not what I understand by gratitude. So tell us what you see.
Well, you are absolutely right there, because the word is overused. You know, gratitude. Oprah talks on her shows about gratitude. Everyone is buzzing this word around. And in some ways, it's been happening for a long time. And I became rather annoyed by this, because I thought, if we throw this word around so callously, are we really understanding what happens when gratitude really hits? Does it just become, oh, thanks? Or are we able to look inside ourselves and say, well, what am I responding to here, and what does it mean? So that was why I felt I had to write this book, which includes what I call 5 insights for a fulfilled life. Because I feel that some very deep processes are happening here if we'll allow them to. But like everything in life, if we just mouth the words, we can't feel the feeling, and we can't know what lies behind. So gratitude is much deeper and much more valuable, I think, than most of us realize. So I felt I had to write about it.
What do you understand specifically to be the meaning of gratitude?
Big question to answer. I'll try to do that. Gratitude is not just being thankful for good things. Somebody gives you something that you like and you say, oh, thank you, and you feel gratitude. Gratitude also extends to feeling a sense of purpose if bad things happen. Now, we can respond to bad things happening. We can say, oh, I don't like that. That's mean. The world hates me. Or we could say, by taking things less personally, we could say, something difficult has happened here. What am I supposed to learn from it? What am I supposed to gain from this? Does this happen for a reason? Is it just to prove that I'm always in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is it to prove something else is happening? And my studies have shown again and again that if we start to look at events that happen in our lives, good and bad, in this way, we come to a much more peaceful place. So, for example, let's think of perhaps an everyday occurrence, which happens certainly around here, where people seem to drive like idiots most of the time. Somebody bumps into your car and bends the fender. You can have a choice at that point. You can get incandescently angry that someone had the temerity to run into your car, which of course raises your blood pressure, raises your heart rate, and probably does an enormous amount of damage just by feeling that anger so personally. Or you can choose to respond to it in terms of, this is telling me something. Is it telling me to slow down? Is it telling me that I need to pay even more attention than I do? Which choice we make here is entirely up to us. But I can tell you which is the more mentally healthy and more peaceful choice. Because in the end, it doesn't make any difference materially. The car is dented. The insurance will either pay or it won't pay. You can't undo it. What you can do is extract the start of a spiritual lesson from it. If you choose to go to the point of asking, oh, wow, what am I being asked to think about here? Then we discover that gratitude is linked to a sense of humility, and that in turn is linked to a sense of beauty and innocence, and finally to a sense of our place in the world. What are we here to do? Are we actually here to get angry because somebody dented the fender of our car? No, I think there's more to it than that. So that in broad outline is what I'm looking at and what I'm asking people to consider. Too often, people talk themselves into, oh, it's just my luck. This always happens to me, which is kind of similar to saying, I'm a bad person and I deserve it. Ooh, nobody deserves to think of themselves that way. And yet the clients who come to me for counseling very often seem to think that the entire universe has arranged itself just in opposition to them. And it makes them extremely unhappy. So that's a short answer to a big question, and I can certainly go into more detail if you'd like.
I think there's so much in that, and I think perhaps it would be useful to break it down a little bit.
Right, I can do that.
We can just start off. I was just thinking we can start off by thinking about how there is a link between adopting a mind of gratitude, or a way of living that incorporates a sense of gratitude, which isn't really, it's an acknowledgement of the beauty that exists within our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the psychological studies which have shown that if you are looking for the positives, then you are rewiring, almost literally, because you're creating new neural pathways in your brain, which are teaching you to feel more positive, because you are now training yourself to look for the positives. So there's an actual physical correlation here. So there's a spiritual, and there is a mental health from a physical perspective. So that's quite important to start with, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely, yes. It has long been said, quite truthfully, I think, that pessimists never have a good time and optimists are always capable of having a good time. It depends on what you see before you. And what you see before you is, or can be, a habitual thing based on your background, but also when we feel emotions, we create different chemical composites in our brains and in our blood systems. This has been known about for a long time, and we can become addicted to certain types of concoctions that our wonderful bodies are able to create, and we can become addicted to the negative ones. And so when we're talking about people who are in a place of non-gratitude and depression and pessimism, we're also talking about internal body chemistry, which has been explored by people far more learned in that department than I am. We're talking about an addiction to the certain feelings that one can get from feeling put upon and that the world is a difficult place. But we can also become somewhat more addicted, as it were, to thinking positively. And it is true that, and again, many, many clinical trials and tests have been done about this. It is true that when people are optimistic, they see more possibilities. And when they see possibilities for change, for development, they see more ways out of difficulties, where the pessimist, the ungrateful person, doesn't see that. And this, of course, is the basis of several very popular television shows, which I don't know if you have them where you are, but where the hero is stuck in an impossible situation and suddenly has an idea, I can. And it is the idea that everybody else in the show says, oh, that'll never work. And yet, if you try it, it might work. And of course, the show is predicated usually on these things working out. Now, this is optimism, but it's also a form of gratitude. It's saying, I'm here. What can I do about, what am I here to learn? Am I here, in fact, to learn that I can find my own way out if I try hard enough? No.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Is that one set of beliefs is completely empowering, so that if you are more open and positive, where you are open to possibilities, that's a tremendously empowering way to be. Whereas if you insist on playing the role of the victim, because it gives you some sort of, well, I mean, in psychology, we can call that secondary gain, which would be a sense of self-righteousness, or perhaps an attention that you would otherwise be lacking. But that's completely, it's imprisoning you in the role of victim, and it's totally disempowering.
Totally.
So this is why it's so important, even when it feels that you are on your knees, to continue to look up and look around and think, okay, what can I do? What can I be grateful for, despite the darkness? Where think of light that I can look at, and perhaps find a way of just turning it from a chink into a shaft. That's the key, isn't it?
It is the key. It is the key. In my book, I describe how I became very, very ill and almost died. And for many people, I had to stop working, and that meant I lost the house I was living in. My marriage was falling apart, etc., etc. And somehow, in the middle of this, when I was being treated actually by an acupuncturist, I began to put things together. And what I put together was, oh, I'm in the wrong place, trying too hard to do something that I cannot do as well as I would like. So the illness that was very close to killing me, very, very close indeed, was something that to some extent I was making worse for myself through my attitude. When I began to change my mindset, which said, and instead of saying, you have to succeed in this, when I changed my mindset and said, you know, I'm not succeeding in this because it's not the right fit for me. Oh, let me find what is the right fit for me. When I made that, it was a moment of profound gratitude. Thank you, I said to the universe. I said, thank you. You've just given me a very powerful lesson. And as I put it in the book, I was prepared to die rather than be proved wrong. In other words, I was going to make this job work if it killed me. Ever heard people say that? Well, it nearly did kill me. And luckily, I had the sense to realize this is not the way forward. So this type of gratitude where other people would say, oh no, I'm out of work, I'm penniless, I'm homeless, what am I going to do? Turn it around. What am I here to learn? What is the big, big issue? Now, there is a very interesting gentleman, Andrew Bienkowski, who writes about this in terms of what he calls radical gratitude. To tell you his story is hair-raising. He and his entire family was arrested by the Soviets during one of the purges and pogroms and sent to Siberia. And he was 4 or 5 at the time, I forget, he and his brother. And they were put in the cattle carts and sent off in the freezing cold to Siberia. And with him was his grandfather. And his grandfather said at a certain point, he said, I'm dying, I'm not going to eat, take my food. And then grandfather said, bury me naked. And you think, well, grief, what's that? And what grandfather was saying was, I know it's a disgrace to me as a Jew to be buried naked, but if you sell my clothes, you can get more food and you'll survive. And a very moving moment, really. And at that moment, I think the young Andrew began to realize that what he'd just seen was a gift of absolute pure love. And the pure love would propel him through the rest of his life. Now, he could have spent the rest of his life cursing the Soviet soldiers who'd put him on that train and made life so horrible. Or he could, as he chose to, he could look back and say, I got a huge gift wrapped in an ugly package, but it was still a huge gift. It's not what happens to you, but what you do with it, he decided. And he's made that the basis of his whole practice. So he calls that radical gratitude. And I think it's a very enlightened way forward. He is a man full of peace and love and gentleness. And he's not completely dominated by this vision, which could have left him sad, embittered, and of course, physically crippled by what that sort of emotion does to one. So,
sorry, I was just thinking that it's also something else as well to add to that, which is that by focusing on the tremendous act of heroism of his grandfather, he is actually honoring his grandfather.
yes.
Or if he chose to focus on the cruelty and the injustice, which were obviously the cause of his grandfather's death, as well as the loss of his grandfather, in a way he would be accidentally dishonoring his grandfather, because he would not be focusing on the love which he was given through his grandfather. So, and I think the reason that struck me is because I've been doing a lot of thinking about the link between gratitude and humility. If you spend just a moment to consider what goes into your breakfast in the morning, where each of the ingredients comes from, who has actually made it possible for it to be there, it's not long before you begin to think, wow, that's quite something. That's really something. And what you have then is a sense of awe and wonder at the way that the world is, or the way that the world works, rather than just focusing on all the things that are wrong with it. And that's, and I think when you have that, you end up with love. That's where it leads you, because when you have that sense of gratitude, and then you have the sense of wonder and awe, listening to your story and thinking about that man giving up his life in that way, all I feel is this tremendous sense of wonder and awe at his act of heroism. And of course, despite the fact that I'm not the one who is his grandchild, all I could feel is love for this man. So there is that link going through, and I love the way that you outline that in the book so well.
Yes, you put it so beautifully. In the book, what I suggest happens, the 5 insights, is exactly as you describe them, and that is, an event happens, whatever it is, the death of someone close to one, or something more minor. Maybe one loses one's job rather than the loved one. And then the challenge is, can we be grateful for this event? And it is a challenge, losing a loved one. And yet, that's what they say at funeral services, isn't it? Let's give thanks for the life of this person so recently departed. If we can access that, we can bring back the positive aspects of the person we knew. And when that happens, I call that first insight, the gratitude. When that happens, we become very humble, I think, in the face of life's great mysteries, life, death, love, and so on. And when we become humble, one of the really interesting things to me is that the humble heart sees and perceives more than the proud heart. We're prepared to look a little closer and realize, oh, this has been sent to me for a reason. What is the reason? And when we get to that place of humility, when we are not as important as observing the things around us, that's when the world becomes incredibly beautiful, even the difficult parts of the world. So we've gone from gratitude to humility to a deep and profound awareness of beauty. And beauty doesn't have to be, conventional beauty. There can be beauty in the look of a scruffy, dirty child, just because it is that child's soul shining through. But everything becomes changed when we don't put ourselves first. So there's beauty in the world. I mean, look out of my window at the moment, it's raining. And I could go, oh, it's a nasty day. Or I could be very much aware of everything growing out there. And it's a beautiful world, and that rain is part of that.
I was just thinking, you were talking about, the scruffy child and the soul shining through, and it just made me smile, because one of the ways in which my dog makes me laugh and connect with joy, you will be amused to hear, is when he's rolled in something absolutely foul. and I can't help but laugh and feel joy when he's done it, despite knowing the half hour of work I have ahead of getting him cleaned up. I couldn't care less because of the joy that he's taken in that moment. And, and I do feel gratitude. I feel gratitude for the fact that he is so happy. And, you see the look on his face. He looks completely proud of himself. And he's been in ecstasy for, at least 2 minutes, rolling about. And I could stop him, but I deliberately choose not to, because I know that this is joy. And it's the joy of watching him be himself. And why would I want to live with another species if I don't honor the ways of that species?
Yes.
So this is, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's how we interpret. And you're quite right about rain. I've taken to saying that when it rains, it's an opportunity for the earth to drink deeply. And it completely changes my relationship with rain now.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, but how beautiful that is. I love the story of your dog.
But it's true. He just looks so completely and utterly happy. Thankfully, he doesn't do it every day. The opportunity always is. But when it does, it's sheer ecstasy that he's experiencing. And for me, I can't help but feel joy that he's happy. And so what do I feel? I feel gratitude for sharing the opportunity to share my life with another species, which is so enriching.
Yes.
So this is, it's all part of it, isn't it? And why is it that what we're talking about is so important? It's important because this is, I think, the secret to good mental health.
Yes.
It's the secret to the opening of our hearts and into the realm of the transcendent. And I think that is the key to happiness.
Yes. definitely, definitely. It is the opening of our hearts. What you described so beautifully, in fact, is right there on my funny little chart, because your dog rolling in the mud, you responded to it as a beautiful moment, and what it awakened in you is, I think, the fourth aspect of gratitude, which is a sense of innocence.
Yes.
Here's the dog enjoying itself. How wonderful is that? I mean, wow. Let's be there enjoying this with the dog. The world is wonderful at that point.
Yes, and that's exactly it. He smells fox poo or a cow pat or whatever, and he thinks, hooray. And it's that innocence, of being free to express himself, or to express what he is, which is a dog, the joy of the scent, the joy of rolling in it.
Yes.
And it's in his mind, he could never think, oh, what I'm doing is going to be inconvenient, or is, I might, pick up some horrible parasite from. That is innocence. And that, you're absolutely right. It is one of the things that does evoke the joy in me, is that innocence.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing, because when we are in that place of innocence, we completely rethink, as you've just described, where we exist on the planet. You have described you giving your dog the opportunity to be a dog and enjoying that. And when we stop being, humans who are in charge and who set the rules, suddenly we realize, oh, our purpose on this planet, to paraphrase the Dalai Lama, is to be joyful. That's why we're here. Even when our dog rolls, especially when our dog rolls in a cow pat.
Indeed. And it's the same. And it was when you mentioned, a child, that made me think about that, because you see this in children too.
Yeah.
When I was a teacher, and very often with little children, they would want to come and hug you when you walked into the classroom, or were talking to them, and they could be absolutely filthy or snotty, and could I ever say no? Of course not. In the time that I was a teacher, I used to catch 2 or 3 colds a year easily. And I think most teachers will relate to this. But could I say no to a child wanting a cuddle? Of course not, because it was them wanting to connect with me, and the innocence of that was so pure and beautiful. I'm not going to think, ooh, no, stay away, thanks. But I have seen people do that, and it always breaks my heart when I see it.
Yes. Again, a beautiful example, isn't it? The small child is maybe as muddy as the dog, and yet the hug is still wonderful, even if it means you have to take your clothes to the laundry the next day or that night or whatever. Yeah, for some reason I'm just reminded of my grandchildren, my step-grandchildren, but I think of them as my grandchildren. There are twins who are 2.5, and one morning when their mother was fast asleep, or getting breakfast or something, the twins, 2.5, decided they wanted to go outside for a walk. So they went down the stairs, undid the front door, and walked out into the street. This is an urban environment. They wanted to go for a walk because they'd seen Peppa Pig playing in muddy puddles. So they decided a muddy puddle was what they wanted to find. So they walked off, quite some distance actually, because when my stepdaughter woke up and said, wait, we're missing some children here. She couldn't see them on the street. She couldn't see them anywhere. And she was just about to be completely frantic when the twins come about 100 yards away, come round the corner, walking up the road. They've got their little boots on. They've been playing in the muddy puddles, and they're holding hands. And being a mother, she runs along and says, oh, God, I'm so happy. She couldn't scold them, of course, because she's so relieved. Well, she could have scolded them, but she chose not to. And she said, oh, it's really, this is a busy neighborhood. There are cars. You really, it's a little bit dangerous out there, she said to them. And one of the twins looked up and said, "Oh, yes, that's why we were holding hands."
Oh, Allan, that is just so gorgeous.
Isn't that precious? And
Precious.
how can you not love that? And how can you not be moved by the innocence and the support? I mean, these little twins, 2.5,
And the
holding
beauty,
hands.
and we're back to beauty again.
Beauty.
Because the beauty of the image that's in my mind of these two little toddlers holding hands, because they understand that there are dangers out there. So we're going to, oh my goodness, that is just,
Isn't
I
that?
don't think I can say any more.
Well, I hope I'll always remember that, because it's just, yeah, it's one of those moments that one is grateful for and yet slightly horrified by the thought as well.
Absolutely. So here we are then. We've had the lot, haven't we? Gratitude. From gratitude comes awe, wonder, humility, and love. And so on that note, I would like to remind our audience that the title of your book is Gratitude and Beyond, 5 Insights for a Fulfilled Life. And I will put a link on the notes to this podcast so that you're easily able to access it. And at the same time, I will also put a link to a YouTube interview, which I have just done with Allan, in which you get the opportunity to learn more about him and his birth chart. So I want to say thank you once again, Allan, for your time today.
Oh, it's been such a privilege to speak with you, because I feel very attuned to so many aspects of what you have to say, and that is something that I feel is rather moving, and I'm very grateful for. So thank you for inviting me. This has been just lovely.
You've been listening to In the Light, and I look forward to having your company once again. Next week, I will be discussing grief and bereavement. So have a wonderful week,